Okay, we're on page 186 of the note spiral. This is scenario 3 for one sample proportions, and it is a hypothesis test. And you can see that this was originally a AP test question back in 1998. So a large university provides housing for 10% of its graduate students to live on campus. The university's housing office thinks that the percentage of graduate students looking for housing may be more than 2%. That sounds like we may have a direction there. The housing office decides to survey a random sample of graduate students, and 62 of 481 respondents say they are looking for housing on campus. All right. So, the basis of the survey data, on the basis of the survey data, would you recommend the housing office consider increasing the amount of housing on campus available to graduate students? Give appropriate evidence to support your recommendation. Right, okay, so we're gonna go ahead and run a hypothesis test based on the 10%. We'll do part B in a moment. So basically the claim is that it's 10%, that's what it's been over time, but they're looking for more, so this lets us know we're looking for a greater than 10%. So P naught is the true population proportion of graduate students looking for on-campus housing, okay, or campus housing. So they told us it was a random sample, so that was a given. N is less than 10% of the population, so that's 4,810. It's reasonable to assume that there are at least 4,810 graduate students. Apparently, this is a very large university, okay? And then we have NP, which they said 62 of the 481 respondents say that they're looking for on-campus housing, which means Q hat equals 1 minus P. So in this case, we're going to have 481 minus the 62 equals 419. So that's what Q hat is. The sample, and so this is also greater than 10. So basically we satisfied our normality condition. And please remember, these have to be whole numbers, as does N, right? So we end up with 62 out of 481, and let's just check our math real quickly to make sure that that really is answer to that. 62 divided by 481 is 0.1289 rounded, okay? So this ends up being P hat. P hat is 0.1289, and please remember, P in this case was 0.10, and there is a difference. A sample proportion, population proportion. And so then when we get to our formula is basically P hat minus P naught. And once again, hypothesis test, you use the standard error of the population. So you use the proportion from the population. If it's been a confidence interval, you use P hat. Once again, I'm going to write it down because I don't want you to forget. This is the formula for a one sample proportion, P hat plus or minus Z star for the confidence interval. And it has P hat, Q hat, and N. And that's different than a hypothesis test. This using the sample proportion, this is using the population proportion. So plugging into this formula, and remember this is a greater than, so we're going to have probability that Z is greater than, we kind of have an ugly number for P hat, 0.1289 minus 0.10 over 0.10 times 0.90 over 481. Now, real quickly, I need to tell you where Q hat, or where this 0.9 came from, and it's just 1 minus the 0.10. That's where the 0.9, that's supposed to say 0.9. Okay, so that's what we have there. And notice that there's no 2 out in front because we're not working with a not equal. You only have the 2 times when you're working with a not equal. So then we're going to go stats test, 1 proportion z-test. And our original claim was 10%. That's what we believed it to be. 62 graduate students were interested. 481 were surveyed. Remember, X and N must be whole numbers. We're looking for greater than, and we calculate. I really want that to be a blue. Looks better on my screen. And I end up getting Z is 2.11. So the probability that Z is greater than 2.11 equals 0.0173. So 0.0173 is less than 0.05. If I made these the same length, it makes a lot more sense. 173 is less than 500. We reject the null. So our p-value is 0.10173. We reject the null. There is sufficient evidence at alpha equal 0.05 to suggest that the true population proportion of graduate students who would like on-campus housing is greater than 10%. Okay. So to me, based on an alpha 0.05, there's more than 10% of the population would like on-campus housing, right? So this is a change. Now, when I look at part B, it says, in addition to the 481 students who responded to the survey, 19 didn't. So basically, real quickly, just do some math real quickly off to the side. 481 plus 19 equals 500. So that would have made, the total sample would have been 500. If all of them responded, they didn't, so we needed to use the 481 number. If these 19 had responded, is it possible that your recommendation would have changed? All right, so if they had responded, is it possible a recommendation would have changed? Well, notice we sat there and said, and I should have made this comment, we need more graduate student housing. So I need to add that. So we need more graduate student housing. That's what a recommendation is. Now, that's what our decision was. But what if these 19 had responded, and obviously they didn't care enough to respond, so they're probably happy with the situation. What if they were not interested in on-campus housing? All right. Well, at that point, we still have 62, the original 62 who want graduate housing, but now our proportion is 500. Our denominator is 500. So when we do that, we have 62 divided by 500, excuse me, which is 0.124. And 1 minus that will give me Q hat, which is 0.876. Okay, so now we have a change. So our P hat is 0.124. Our original 10% still the same because this was what was claimed. And we have 0.10 and 0.90. This should have a decimal point. But now this number, please notice, changed to 500. So then we go stats, test, and we're doing a 1 proportion z-test. We still had 62 who wanted on-campus housing, but now it's out of a group of 500. Did it increase? And the answer is we have 0.036, so definitely the p-value changed, and so did our z-star. And let me go back real quickly. Stats, test, 1 proportion z-test. 62, 500, yes, like all those values. And I press calculate. So this should be 0.0368. This should also be 0.0368. But it's less than alpha. So since it's less than the alpha of 5%, we would still reject the null. Our decision would not have changed. Our percentage changed from 0.0173 to 0.0368, but since we have an alpha of 0.05, and in both cases, our p-values are less than alpha, we're going to still reject a null. We still say we need more on-campus housing for graduate students. All right, so that closes out one sample proportions for the this hypothesis test. Thank you.